you everyone for coming along to this panel. This is Accessibility in Megagames, Unseen Disabilities. So what are we going to be doing today? So we're going to spend about 45 minutes having a light chat around a couple of issues around disabilities in Megagames specifically. So the Equality Act 2010 considers any long-term condition that's a substantial impact on a person's life as a disability. But something we don't talk about very often is the majority of these are unseen. And so that has, well, that should have an impact on how we design mega games for various attendees and how we pick spaces and all the rest of that. So we're going to spend some time today talking through and seeing what issues we think we have with mega games at the moment and asking some questions around how we can improve those. So I've got a few people joining me today. I've got Becky, Tom, and Jen, who will be with us momentarily, who's having a little technical difficulties. So we're going to start with some introductions because people are going to be better at talking about themselves than I am going to be about talking about them. So I'll kick off. I'm Mr. Megagame, Matt Bambridge. I've been megagaming for 5-6 years now. And I have dyslexia and have had problems with depression for probably last 10-15 years, being medicated and under counselling at various points. Something I will say is just because we're running this panel on disabilities, that doesn't entitle anyone to any information about anyone. So if anyone wants to say anything or hint at things when they ask questions, and for other panelists as well, you're more than welcome to do so. But just for people watching, please don't go digging unnecessarily unless that's been invited. Okay, Becky.
Cool. So hi, I'm Becky Campbell-Ladley. You might know me as Becky blogs. I'm here on the panel today because I've actually got 2 chronic illnesses, inflammatory bowel disease and multiple sclerosis. I've had, they're still reasonably recent for me. I got diagnosed with IBD in 2016 and then MS in 2017. It was a bad couple of years. Neither of them are sort of affect me in a particularly severe way, but they do sort of affect my life to a greater or lesser extent at various points, and they affect sort of like my participation in mega games again to a greater or lesser extent at various points because they're sort of chronic. But I'm also here because I have designed mega games and I know firsthand the many different pressures that mega game designers are under to work accessibility things in, and that sort of so much of design is done at sort of breakneck speed, so the best intentions often get forgotten about, mislaid, that sort of thing. So yeah, glad to be here today.
Cool, thank you very much, Becky. Tom.
Hi, I'm Tom. I'm having issues with my headphones, so I'm just going to be on the general audio for now, so I apologize if my audio quality is a little. I have been megagaming since that might be sorted. There we go. I've been megagaming since the first Shut Up and Sit Down video came out, the Watch the Skies. So that must be about 5-6 years. I've never designed a mega game, but I have experience of organising other events and trying to make sure that they are friendly to people with all sorts of disabilities. I have ADHD. Well, I'm in the process of getting an ADHD diagnosis, which isn't helped when you find it hard to remember to things that you wanted to speak to your doctor about. And like Matt, I've suffered with depression for years, though at the moment I wouldn't say I'm disabled with it because of the brilliance of meds, but that's where we are.
Cool. Okay, thank you very much, both. And we will have Jen Steele along in a few minutes. Hopefully, a tragic internet accident has driven her a little bit late, but she'll be along. So what we're going to do from here is we're going to focus on 2 main questions to myself and the panelists, and then we'll go on to some questions from you guys, the audience. So please, at any point, throw questions in. The more the better. I would like this to be a fairly conversational style chat, so it would be great if we can have as many questions from you lot in the audience as possible. So the first one we're going to go for is, what problems do you think Megagaming currently has with accessibility? Tom, let's kick off with
you. I think in general, the problems that Megagaming has with accessibility, in particular around disability, are related to lack of understanding. I think there is definitely no malice that people don't want to make their mega games accessible for everybody, but people, when they're designing their games, aren't able to think and aren't able to see some of the things that might cause issues for people that they might not experience themselves or know people directly who experience. That's slightly inarticulate. Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely. Hello, Jen.
Hello. Sorry,
Excellent.
somebody decided to cut through my internet cable this morning, so I had to take a bit of a trip across town to my partner's work.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, thank you very much for doing that. Absolutely. So we're just moving on to a question, but we'll go back slightly to introductions. My apologies, Jen, to dump you into your introduction as soon as you come in. But yeah, could you give us a couple of minutes about yourself, please?
I'm Jen. I had something I'd prepared and I don't know where it is. I have played and kind of controlled probably a little bit over a dozen mega games, generally in the south of England. I don't have any particular medical diagnoses, but suffer with a few issues in metagaming. So struggling to read the rule book. I really hate noise, which is a massive issue at Megagames. And I have like a foot condition, which makes standing up all day really a struggle. Other than that, my background is kind of architecture, graphic design. So I'm coming from it, like how we could maybe fix some of these problems from a slightly different viewpoint than some other people, I guess. Oh, and I recently moved to Vancouver, hence why it's light here and not where you are.
Oh, right, brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Jen. So the first question we're going through is, he says as he loses all his questions, is what problems do you think Megagaming currently has with accessibility? And Tom kicked us off. Would you like to go next, or would you like a minute to settle in before I...
Two seconds just to open my notes.
Excellent. Becky, let's go to you.
Sure. Yeah, I very much agree with Tom that that I think it's a lack of understanding and lack of awareness of accessibility issues. And to be honest, it's completely understandable because there are so many accessibility concerns out there, and each person, each person with accessibility needs has different ones as individual needs. So, especially if designers don't have any themselves, it might not occur to them that this should even be a thing they're considering to start with, never mind what things they could be including. And I think that, there are obviously a lot of things that can be done in very major ways to do things. But I think something that would really help would be more knowledge of I guess, quick wins. And they're not going to solve every problem, but they are going to be things that designers can implement in a way that is not going to take an awful lot of time or cost a lot in terms of immersion. And I'm sure we'll talk about those bigger things that we can do later. But that could have a significant impact. So one thing that comes to mind is if people are using colour to mark different cards or components, including a pattern or some other visual indicator on the cards, it would take just a few minutes within the design, but it will have a big impact for colourblind players. So other sort of small things that can be done, perhaps some sort of resource can be available, or just people talking about it more. I think, if we come up with some good sort of ideas in this discussion, I think this could be a really good resource for designers to go to be like, oh, yep, got some of these cool ideas in.
And one of the really important things to me about those quick wins is that making mega games more accessible for people with disabilities, whether invisible or visible, makes mega games easier for everyone. The things might be introduced to help people with this condition, that condition, what have you, but ultimately the effect of them should be making it more accessible, more welcoming for everybody, whether or not they would consider themselves to be disabled.
I think I'd absolutely agree with that. So going back to the question, I think I'd agree exactly with Tom. I don't think there's any malice in any of the decisions that make things more difficult. I do think essentially there are pressures around what the hobby is right now, which is a fairly small niche hobby with a limited amount of cash. So one is venues. The venues we try and get, let's say, not exactly modern venues designed with everyone in mind. Just design time. Most of the mega games put out at the moment and are done basically by one person. There are a couple that are being done by teams at the moment, but there's an energy issue there, and there's the traditional one, which is just a not thinking about it really. And as will be coming up in other panels this weekend, very much the normal demographic for these things is people who look like me, essentially. And that is 95%, if not higher, of the demographic. So I think there's a few of the issues, and we'll bore down a bit more. But Jen.
Oh, okay. Slightly unsure what's been covered, but I'll try not to cover anything before. In terms of the color blindness, I looked at the numbers last night, and in a 75-person game, based on Rob's numbers of 83% male at the moment, which we're hoping to make better, you should assume there's 5 people who are colorblind in your game of 75. So it's a given there are colorblind people there, and they won't just be red green. So if there is a real reason that you can't do the color and symbol thing, there is kind of options for ways to get around that. So A, using colors that are kind of easily distinguishable to colorblind people. B, if I know there's, I forget the game, maybe it was Mirror Shades, lots of very small colored pieces that go on a board. So maybe you can't put bigger things that would have a symbol on, and there's just so many of them. Then whether or not you provide a physical legend, so one of each of the pieces stuck to a piece of board, so that if you're colorblind, you can compare that to the legend, and you're not explaining everything as being these pieces are red. It's this is what this piece looks like. Because I do know at least one instance of someone cheating without realizing, because they just couldn't distinguish the colors. Whether or not, equally, if you're giving someone a load of different colored little pieces, there's the offer of something like a pillbox where you can separate them all up. But I think there's probably a lot of things that could be done. But the emphasis is often on if you've got an issue, you coming forward to ask for it. And I think everybody who is here are the people who have been able to cross that barrier of entry. There's going to be a certain amount of people who just won't mega game because they can't conceive of a way it would work for them. But equally, there's going to be a huge amount of us who are just struggling through, and nobody really realizes that there probably are simple ways to fix the problems. And like Becky said, where are the easy wins? We can't expect to go from where we are now to ticking every accessibility box in 1-2 games. But if you can kind of bring in a few easy wins from game to game, if you can if more able people go to games and realize that there is provisions for people who might have difficulties, then they're more likely to invite friends that would otherwise maybe not come to a mega game. I think probably all game designers would love their games to kind of sell out straight away and there'd be like hundreds of people to play them. So I think anything we can do to persuade more people to play, obviously like more women, more like non-cis white dudes would be great. But yeah, like I think there's probably lots of issues that we don't even realize is an issue. Just as a mega game, like the idea of basically spending 8 hours kind of frantically in a noisy, hot, like busy space where you don't really have a break. Even for like even for a like high functioning whatever person is hard. Like they're not like, I can't imagine anyone comes home from a mega game and is like, I'm gonna go for a run. Like it's like a tiring thing, and like whatever your like your kind of problem might be with mega games, like I think just like there's like a lot of things that maybe having this discussion realizes that maybe we need to think about, like whether or not it's, I don't know whether if like turns being like 5-10 minutes longer would make them less stressful, probably not, but like certainly there's lots of people who maybe could benefit from like being able to take more time out, being able to have toilet breaks, being able to sit down a little bit. Like I don't know how you fix that problem in a mega game, because it seems kind of the antithesis of a mega game.
I'm going to stop you slightly there, Jem, because I've got a nice little thing to go through, and we're going to move through. But basically, I've broken it down to game materials, briefing materials, space consideration, and game timetables. And so we'll come back to some of those things in just a moment. But let's round off on kind of game materials, basically. So we talked a little bit about pieces for people with colorblindness. Do you think there are other things in game materials? And I suppose here, if there's not, we can cross over into briefing materials as well, just on physical pieces themselves. Does anyone else have anything? And if in the audience you've got any questions or suggestions on this, please let us know. I'm going to randomly pick Tom because he said something as I was saying it. Excellent.
Fair enough. Without wishing to be a dick, I'm going to slightly derail what you're going for there, Matt. So picking up on something Jen said, personally, I am not particularly aware of what issues there could be with game materials. It's something I've had a think about, but obviously I'm not somebody who has issues with game materials. And much as I have tried to put myself into the head of people who do have issues with game materials, I'm sure there will be things that I won't think of that could cause people issues. Jen pointed out that one of the main issues that we have is that people, the onus is on people to advocate for themselves, saying, oh, actually, I need this adjusting, I need this sort of thing. And that is very much at the moment the case. I think in many mega game communities, it's starting to improve. We need to listen to the people who may have issues. The key thing to making mega games accessible is giving people the opportunity to raise those. So rather than the onus being on them to pluck up the courage and go and say to the designer, actually, could I check, is this going to be all right for somebody with color blindness? In the the player registration form, have a question about what are any of your access needs. It doesn't necessarily need to be phrased around disability, making it clear that it could be for people who don't see themselves as disabled but might have access needs, because lots of people who would fall under the legal definition of disabled wouldn't think of themselves as disabled and would sometimes feel a bit of a fraud describing themselves as disabled. And of course there's a lot of stigma attached to the label, so people would, some people may not want to identify as disabled for that reason, but asking people for whatever access needs adjustments they might have at the beginning is really important. And I'm really sorry to have derailed where you wanted to go with that, Matt.
Can I add a quick point, and then let the derailing end? I think also like it's not even just about disability, because obviously like everybody's been a new player once, or like there's almost like a situation where you just kind of like want to make it clear that you're open to like giving a little bit of, even if it's like advice or assistance. So like if I haven't played a game before, or I'm coming without any friends, and maybe I'm a single woman, and could you suggest that, like, could you put me in a nice team, like that would be a good place for like a new player, or like, or hey, actually, like, I don't really like noise all that much, and I quite actually like playing a game where I'm sat in an ante room, like, but I don't understand the game in advance, and often there isn't that much information for me to be able to tell, like, even beyond kind of what the gameplay is, because between characters, maybe like, I like this kind of game style, I like doing more puzzly things, so this bit is more suited to me. I think like just opening up like the ability to have a bit of a conversation with the game designer and saying like, hey, this is my situation. I don't want to be like I don't want to make a big deal out of it, but if there's like an easy option that would make my day like better, like I'd love that kind of thing. But I think it's just a bit how we word getting it across that that's like an acceptable conversation that we want, like as game designers want to have with our players.
I'm going to continue the derailing.
Hey, sorry, Matt.
Sorry,
No,
Matt.
that's what I'm going to sip my drink.
You said you wanted this to be conversational.
I did.
Yeah.
Let's crack on.
So I completely agree. I've long been an advocate of casting questionnaires, you know, asking people what sort of games they want, asking people whether they want antagonistic roles or cooperative roles. That's all going to make it more accessible to people who don't have disabilities, but just have requirements or preferences. And I think a big thing as well, and something that I haven't talked about that much, is when you ask people these questions, because it's no point doing casting questionnaire a week before the game, because then you can't change anything. You get any of this information, and most of your players that are signed up, that are normally signing up like 2 months, 3 months before the game, where you've still got time to change things, you're finding out that most of them are into role play roles, or half of them are colorblind, or, you know, you don't have the time to implement those changes a week before the game. Whereas if you ask them at the point when they sign up, if you make that part of your sign up process, you might need to go back and get some more information from them once you've sort of designed your game a little bit more, perhaps. But it's a lot better to do that at the point where they actually sign up for the game, and then you've got all of that information when you're still working on your game, when you're still coming up with your final character list, or you're still making all your components and everything like that. And I think, yeah, adding in things. So the way that I phrase it on my casting questionnaires is, are there any ways we can make the game more accessible for you? And I'm actually thinking that we can do that. And then you can have a little bit thing underneath, like, e.g., this is my first game, e.g., you know, I'll need to sit down regularly, you know, that sort of thing, just to point to people. It might be disability related. It might be to do with it, the fact that it's a new game for you, or, you know, anything else.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. And I think it's something as well for when a game is being marketed, which I've kind of lumped in my head with briefing materials, but being more clear about what is contained within a game. At the risk of labeling things too much, it would be handy for people to know whether this is a high RPG style game like a Deep Haven or a Trope High, or is this a very mechanically driven war game like Case Blue or something more traditionally out of Megagame makers. These can help people basically, not just around the choice of what they like to play as a player, but if these types of games throw up more types of problems for whatever condition or issue someone has, it allows them basically more choice. Are you prone to anxiety and it's a high RPG game and you've got to go talk to people a lot? Okay, what changes can be made on that? Can you make some of that more mechanistic? Can you drive the interactions down to 1 or 2 people rather than a dozen people? There are things you can do there. But on briefing materials, again, for me specifically with the dyslexia, and I normally hide it in games. I always have.
Dive in really quickly, Matt, with one other thing about when you're advertising a game. When you're advertising a game, I think it's also worth making it clear in, you know, sign-up materials, in advertising materials, that there are the possibilities to, you know, to make adjustments. I think people will often think, oh, I'd quite like to play, but I'm a bit nervous about could I cope with X, Y, Z, and therefore not sign up and not get to the casting questionnaire where they have the opportunity to raise it. So making it clear in pre-sign up materials that that's a possibility. And anyway, back now to the point that you were back to briefing materials.
Back to briefing materials. Kind of around dyslexia and I'm reading 20 to 40 page briefing documents. So it's difficult for me, and I've never really talked about it, and I hide it as much as possible because I find it embarrassing. I shouldn't, but I do. They are difficult to read through, especially in the format they're in at the moment. It's not just that it's 20 to 40 pages, it's that the density of them is quite high as well. There's a lot of big, long paragraphs in there that can be difficult to get through, where for me things broken up and more visual representation, or if someone wants to do me an audio file or a video, I'll be thrilled with you. Thank you very much. But they're big, heavy documents, and as Jen kind of said about things that are difficult for people who don't have any issues, they become extra difficult if you do. Jen, I see you waiting to say something there. Yeah.
I mean, so this is like my massive bugbear to the point where I don't really read my briefing documents. Like I will, if it's a game I haven't played before, I will get my partner to read my briefing documents and literally tell me the sections of it that I need to read. Because it's just like the very idea of sending, I mean, the majority of them I see, it's like minimum 20 to 30 pages, A4 pages of like heavy prose. And it's too much. So I'm kind of in the process of like making a new briefing, like basically taking the Watch the Skies brief, like standard briefing document, and then rewriting it in like what it could be. And I think partially, not only are they really difficult for people who struggle to read, like in the context of a game, when you just want to check something, they're not really great. Like I'm looking for this one rule and I'm flicking through, and the contents page doesn't really help me. So in terms of kind of my accessibility concept for briefing documents, I have a list. Let me find it. Basically, I think like the way that they're structured doesn't work. I think you need to kind of split them into maybe 3 sections where you have an initial section that everybody needs to know. So like overview, maybe not too much, like if you want to have like a 2 A4 page thing that like makes it all atmospheric and explains like the setting and stuff, like fine, but just kind of make it clear that people don't need to read it. But kind of make first section absolutely everything, like everyone needs to know just the basics, like how like maybe the research point, like the resource points work, like the turn structure, but really basically not in the way necessarily they're always shown. Images, like if you can show something in an image, like it's as well as text, it's really useful. So let me just, with me, one of my like few game things. So just in terms of like when you get like a board game, not only do you get a description of how it works, but you also get like, these are the options, like this, like you get the images as well, which isn't something that necessarily gets done that much in Megagaming like documents. And then I think like in terms of the mechanics and the rules, like I would love them to be split up for your role. So in like Watch the Skies, you've got like this 2 pages really clearly marked is like everything that's specific to being the head of state, then specific to being a scientist. And you make it clear that like, it's great if you can read everybody else's section, but like as a minimum, you need to know, like you need to have read this white section, like this kind of overview, and your section, understand how it works. If there are any issues, like ask. And then the final section at the back, you just have like reference stuff that you might need to like look up. So like in Watch the Skies, there's, or at least the version I have, there's a table that has kind of like, these are all the different prices for things that you can buy with RP. Like realistically in advance, you might skim it, but like actually that needs to be somewhere where you can just like open it on the day and just like look for a price. And you make it kind of clear, and you don't kind of just, I find briefing materials seem to just be a mind dump. It's like the game designer just like started typing like, I'm going to write about this, and then I'm going to write about like this mechanic. And they're not really structured in a way that helps the people who need them like understand them.
So I think you're absolutely right there, Jen. I think that the way that the rules documents and things like that, they're created in the way that makes sense if you're the creator of the game. You start at a macro scale and then you move on to a smaller scale, a smaller scale, a smaller scale, rather than actually what makes most sense for players, organizing them by what you need for that role. I mean, I must confess, I am a nerdy English teacher with a philosophy degree, a trade union rep who reads employment law for fun. I bloody love reading 40-page rules documents of dense prose, but I'm very aware that that's not the case for most people. And even I have problems if I'm in the middle of a game. Let's say that I have changed roles, you know, the president's been assassinated. I was previously the ambassador and now I'm the president. Well, Christ on about now I need to read all of the things relevant for the president, and they're on page, there's no clear way of finding them. It's page 6, page 14, page 3, and that aspect of it can be challenging. So I've also made a note about organizing rules by roles ultimately, but as well as that, in terms of helping to make the rules more helpful, I love reading the rules, but even just reading the rules a couple of times, I'm still never going to quite get the game. Normally a dummy turn at the beginning helps with that. But equally, I know that other people can't read the rules and much prefer having it as a video, having a video explainer of the rules, much prefer having the explainer on the day of the rules. And ultimately, that's a big thing when it comes to accessibility, is not saying, right, we're going to do it this way. You know, we'll do it this way. This way's more accessible, we'll do that. This way's simpler, we'll do that. But offering it in multiple formats. Because I find a video much harder to engage with, to understand the rules. Other people find reading them much harder to engage with. So if you're giving multiple options, people can engage in whatever way is simplest for them. And it looks like Becky wants to chime in with some of it.
Yeah, I was about to bring it around to Becky as the only person who's designed a game. And we actually had a chat that covered some of this. And I think Becky's got some very valuable input to put in, because I don't think it is just as simple as us as players or people that have issues making a laundry list. There is a consideration being get done, which I think Becky is going to cover off very nicely for us now.
Yeah, so I for both the games that I've run, I have fully intended on making videos for them. I think that I prefer videos personally. I struggle to digest rule books. And for both my games, I've run out of time because there is always so much that you need to do. And I'm tech savvy. I could sit down and make a video. A lot of our designers, and we currently have quite a small design pool, would really struggle, I think, to create a video. And, you know, again, with my rule books, I've tried to structure them in ways. I do tend to somewhat break mine down by role. So, for example, for Everybody Dies, I split out the combat handbook completely, so you didn't need to read that unless you were engaged with the combat game. I also created game sheets. I can't remember if I made them available ahead of the game in sort of like briefing sheets for like combat and things like that. Can't remember if I made them available ahead of the game, but I think that is a good idea because designers are creating them anyway, so make them available.
Without wishing to seem like I'm sucking up to Becky right here, what I would say is a lot of what Becky did for Everybody Dies is a very good model of how to do it.
That's good to hear. But yeah, I guess the thing is that doing all of these things, doing all of the extra things, creating videos, creating the game sheets early enough that they can be sent out to players, all of that is going to come at the sacrifice of the effort going into another part of the game, because if we waited until our games were perfectly designed, all the mechanics were perfectly tested, everything was as accessible as could be, we would struggle to bring games to table. And like, I think that you putting together this accessibility thing for Watch the Skies is going to be a really good thing for the community to have an example of how to do it well. And I think that people will like hopefully learn from other things, from seeing other people doing things. But I do think that, again, it comes back to this awareness of like why we're making these decisions and what impact that's having. And again, looking again at some of the quicker wins and ways that we can improve handbooks without asking designers to create all of their things, you know, in audio and in video and in short and form and in long form for people that prefer reading that. So those are the challenges from my perspective as a designer.
Yeah. So I'll come with a question from Tim Campbell. That kind of links back to, I think, Jen, what you were saying. So I'll direct this one to you first. For games with lots of background setting information, e.g. everybody dies, but perhaps settings that people aren't as familiar with as well, how do you convey that to players without 20 pages of text?
I mean, I think you can convey it without 20 pages of text. I think if there is a certain amount of background, it can be done in maybe 2 pages. And I also think where there's the capability within the team, obviously we're not all necessarily this kind of person, but like, do you have a little like 5 minutes at the beginning where somebody kind of does the kind of, you're in this place and this is what's happening and this is the backstory, and we're going to try and make you feel kind of part of the time and place you're at the beginning, for the people who haven't read that, maybe. I think it's hard. I think there does need to be the option to have that big kind of prosy bit for the people who want to read it. I know I think it was Mirror Shades. They had two game books where one was just about kind of people wear this kind of thing and people do this, and it's like this gets you into the feeling of the world that you're about to inhabit, but it's actually just themic and not kind of mechanically relevant if you don't like have time or the ability to kind of take that amount of information in. And I don't think it has to be a separate thing. I just think like whether or not you use a different font or like a kind of you kind of put boxes around things and you make it clear, this is bold and important, this is less important, like you don't really need to read it. Like it doesn't need to be separated into a separate thing. It just could be made in a way that when somebody who has no problem, when Tom wants to kind of read 20 pages, if it was 20 pages, I think we could probably get Watch the Skies down to maybe 15 and still like work well. But like if somebody like kind of wants to read all of that, they could just read it from end to end. But that for somebody who is struggling, they kind of know that actually like these are the bits that are important. And if I don't fully understand like some of the theme, okay, other people might assume that that's gonna like negatively impact my game, but I think I'd be much more negatively impacted if I just don't understand how things work. And if I can get through the rule book before the game, like I'm gonna have a way better game than if I'm like frantically asking control. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I think
So
this is
I would. Go on, Matt.
Sorry, I'll just go on. I think this is an interesting one because what differentiates mega games in a lot of ways from large board games and draws them closer to LARPs is that there's big pieces of setting information, but we do need to find a way to condense those down. So I wonder if I'm a big fan of cheat sheets for basically everything. Essentially, a cheat sheet helps me digest information. So cheat sheets of major differences or major points of the time. This is very different, so you should be taking this into account. For me, would be a good thing. I'm actually going to move us on from this for the last 10 minutes.
We have timing constraints.
Yeah, because I do want to do a bit on space considerations and game timetables. So we're gonna, please people put your questions in, because if there are no questions, we'll just go directly up to 5-2, but I'd love to have some questions from the audience. So space considerations for mega games. I kind of talked briefly beforehand that they're not necessarily the best type of places. So I'm going to go to Becky first, because again, Becky as a game designer is someone who's had to book kind of places. So we'll kind of go Becky, Tom, Jen, unless people want to ignore me and chime in. It's a theme of the day. But yes, Becky, we'll kick off with you.
There are, I think, 3 venues in Leeds that don't cost the earth, and if one of them is available, we book it, sort of thing. Like, yeah, that is honestly the biggest issue, is that there are so few venues that are bookable, because the venues that honestly you want to book a mega game in that are nice and actually have accessibility things and like internet a lot of the time and various other things, they're booked for weddings. Like on Saturdays, especially in the summer, they are booked for weddings. So you end up in schools can be good, schools can be quite good, or church halls, which often have less accessibility measures in place. But yeah, it's really just about the event. And don't even get me started on London in terms of the pricing down there. Yeah. Leeds venues are so expensive. London venues are just. But yeah, I'll hand off to Tom.
So for me, one of the most important things in terms of venues, because I have experience of making venues as a player and also as, I suppose, the best term might be a producer, where a game that someone else has designed, I am sort of doing the admin for and finding the venue and getting that booked and that sort of thing. And in that context, I think one of the really useful things in terms of accessibility is a breakout space. Obviously, we've got our main room. We know that it's going to be noisy. We know that, by virtue of the venues, by nature of the venues, it's going to be echoey. People are going to be on a lot of the time, and that for some people that will be quite stressful. It's a lot of information coming in all at once. People will burn out, and having a place where people can go and sit for 5-10 minutes if they're feeling burned out, if they're feeling overwhelmed. For me, I tend to just go to my team table because I don't have as many issues around auditory processing. But for people who do have a lot of issues around auditory processing, it's going to be really valuable having just, in the same way as festivals have the chill out tent, having the little quiet room.
I mean, there is probably a massive list of things that if we could make our perfect venue, we would have. Like disabled toilets, like non-gendered toilets would be great. Them all having amazing Wi-Fi, etc. As Becky said, they don't exist. Like parking. But just anything between kind of I know that it's just not even a possibility with so many games, whether or not literally if you've got an option between 2, it's thought about a little bit. I'm sure it is, or just when you are lucky enough to have a venue that ticks the box, you kind of make it clear in the stuff that goes out. So like it's clear that it's disabled, like it's kind of disabled accessible, or or kind of whatever, and then maybe people will be slightly more likely to come. But I think like the architecture of the space that we play games in is really difficult, but I'm sure there isn't, like, there's no quick fix for it.
Certainly not. Oh, go on, Becky.
I was just going to say, or if it's not accessible, I went down to a game, Swan Wharf in London, which the game space is up 3 flights of stairs, 2 days after getting out of hospital. That was not a fun surprise to turn up and see. So if your venue does have accessibility issues, like I think they did actually tell us at the time, to be honest. But I can't remember if they did for certain or not, but like, yeah, just if there are accessibility issues, because also the toilets were at the bottom of the stairs and the game space was at the top.
Oh my God.
Making sure that all of that sort of stuff is so players know, because you don't want a player turning up who does have serious mobility issues and couldn't get up those stairs, and then they've got to turn around and go home from your game. Like, make sure they know. They might have done for this one more game. I can't remember for certain.
That's, to my mind, is a huge black mark against ever using Swan Wharf for games, and I know it was used a while ago. As far as I know, there haven't been many games that have used it more recently. Though it's
closed. It
okay,
no
well,
exists.
that would so definitely it wouldn't. Certainly, I'm aware that up around Pennine Mega Games, we have our bank of venues that we know we can run Mega Games in, and in general, none of them are ideal in terms of an accessibility framework, but we all know that they are at least pretty good in terms of an accessibility framework. And being able to know that we know that there's a disabled toilet, we know that there are ramps if necessary, even if they may necessitate somebody going slightly out of their way in order to use the ramps. And having that bank of venues that we know are good, that we can keep on booking, is really useful. And relatedly, obviously, one of the core things about accessibility is the big room, and we can't do a huge amount about that. But if, as much as possible, we can have venues with side rooms, I know Pennine Games, often in St Thomas Hall in Manchester, there are lots of side rooms that we can put, the table for this section of the game, the table for this region, whatever, in a side room, which just reduces the business of the main room, and that can really help people as well.
Okay. So we've got 5 minutes left. No questions at the moment. So what we'll do, I will ask all our panelists to think of if they could make one improvement and one improvement only to games that they think would make an impact. What would it be? Tom, we'll start off with you.
You're always starting off with me. It would be good if I had time to listen to the others and copy ideas from them. But I'm going to cheat and say 2, just so that I can find a way of answering Tim's question. I think, and I know it's controversial, I know other people very much disagree, but I think having some scheduled breaks can be really useful for people, because I know that I will never take a break during a game, and then actually I'll get to sort of 3 o'clock and end up being disengaged from the brain, because I have just from the game and from my brain, because I have overdone it and wiped myself out and just sitting at my team table eating sugary snacks trying to get my energy back up. So I think breaks would be really useful. Also, in terms of games with lots of background and setting information, one way that you can convey it is audio things. I'm more than happy to volunteer myself to designers to record myself reading their background setting information aloud. And I see Becky, I'm going to regret this, but yes, I'm happy to volunteer to record the audiobooks if you can put up with my weird accents.
Okay,
taking you up on that.
Yeah. Becky.
Oh gosh, I am going to use the opportunity to just harp on again about casting questionnaires, because I do think that they are the single easiest thing that designers can do to make their games better really, really quickly, just by there's loads of examples. I've got some on my blog of a casting questionnaire and including accessibility in it, and just being upfront with players about your game, just more upfront, like telling them whether there's accessibility issues at your venue, telling them if you need to have a high sort of fine dexterity at your game because for certain roles, telling them you know, just being upfront with them about stuff like this, because a lot of the players won't care, won't read it. You know, if you don't have mobility issues or anything like that, you just won't read it. You just won't. You'll just skim over it, because there'll be a section that says, you know, things you might need to know about the game or whatever you call it. But the people who do care about these things will read it, and they will be so pleased that you told them up front.
Jen.
Well, Tom's already on 2, so
Sorry.
One thing that I thought of that could be really useful, if you have sufficient control, whether you had a control that's specifically there to deal with new players and like anyone who's like kind of pre-registered with like some form of accessibility issue, where like literally they just kind of go in and check in with people towards the beginning of the game and like make sure they're having a good time, would kind of be useful, I think, for some people. Oh, I had another one. Oh, asking questions, like Becky said, asking questions really early before everything is set in stone. I get really annoyed when people play test games when they already have like all of the cards printed, because once you printed the cards, you're not making changes to those cards. It's not really a play test anymore. Like you're just asking for someone to pat you on the back. So like just kind of asking other people and not sitting in your little kind of box by yourself like is probably really useful, I just think, for everybody, like in terms of design. And yeah, I think would probably give people an opportunity to do things that they might not have thought about.
Could I just really quickly pick up on the first part of what Jen said there about having a dedicated new player control?
I'm afraid, Tom, because we have run out of time.
Can I just say control is really important?
So
have a good control team.
We have come to time. So thank you very much to Becky, Tom, and Jen. Hopefully they'll be around in the pub a little bit later. In 5 or 6 minutes, I'm going to go straight in to interviewing Johan, who ran Watch the Skies today. So please pop along to that. So thank you very much, everyone. And yeah, this will be available as a recording sometime next week, hopefully. So thanks very much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of the con.
Thanks, Matt.
Matt.
Thank you.
See you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.